How are we doing there, boys and girls? Manthieus here, welcome back to another video. So today I want to spend a few minutes and talk about this dude, the Crowd Pummeler 230. This is Engineer's new crafted mount. And in the last couple of beta builds, we've had a few little updates to this that is brought to light just what might entail this. And it's quite interesting, and I wanted to talk about it today. This is the mount itself. It kind of looks kind of Sky Golem-y sort of styly. We don't know if it does particularly anything too fancy right now, but I think it's a cool looking mount all the same. We've recently seen that there's a whole bunch of materials that go to making it, materials that didn't seem to be craftable. And in the last beta build, it started to come to light that actually these components can just be straight up purchased from a vendor. If you go to Paxton Bombshell at Opportunity Point in the new zone, you can just buy these items. And so we did just that, and we went and we had a little bit of a look. And I tweeted this screenshot out the other day, showcasing that when you go and speak to Paxton Bombshell, he'll sell you all of the components you need. And if you do the napkin math to figure out just how many you need, it comes to the whopping 3.1 million gold to craft this mount. Now, this means there is absolutely definitely going to be some sort of economy around this in some way, shape or form. And there's actually more to the story than is first presented here, because the vendor is not the only way you can get these components. 3.1 million gold is a lot of gold. Sure, buying them all off a vendor is convenient and quick and easy, but there's also a system with engineering known as pilfering. Now, pilfering is the process of taking some parts and just breaking them down into scrap, basically. We have this item called Pilfer Through Parts. Pilfer through 5 engineering parts, both old and new, in search for usable scrap. And you can throw some parts into the mix, you can do some pilfering, and you'll get some scrap out. There's actually a way to specialize into this so it can give you the components needed to make this mount. If you take a look in the spec trees for engineering, we have the inventing tree, and there's a node called parts here. And all you need to do is unlock this, as the first one is when you pilfer through parts, you now have a chance to recover components used to craft the Crowd Pummeler 230. So now we have 2 ways to get the components. Now that we know that there's 2 ways to get the components, which one's the cheaper one? That's what we were trying to determine, and we've done some testing over the last few days to try and figure this out. Speccing into this is not going to cost you too much. A few points in inventing to unlock parts, and you're ready to do some pilfering. Of course, your prerogative as an engineer is to make this as optimal as possible, meaning you probably want to stack things like resourcefulness as high as you possibly can as well. But I wanted to share some of the data I've found and done some testing on this. The first thing to note is when you're pilfering parts, the part matters. There are different parts that have different loot tables, but what doesn't matter seems to be the quality, and this is where I think the system's quite clever. It doesn't matter if you use quality 1, quality 2, or quality 3 parts. They seem to have roughly the same drop chance of these components, which is quite cool. I've actually, in true form, been tracking this in a spreadsheet. This isn't a widely available spreadsheet yet. This is just some of my own personal data I've been throwing stuff together in. But I did a few little bits of testing, pilfering this stuff to try and get the components, and I was tracking how much I was getting. And we'll talk about this a little bit more in a second. But the conclusion I came to very quickly is the quality of the components you pilfer doesn't matter. Why do I think this is cool, though? It's a recycling system. Dragonflight had a real problem where the low quality materials just stacked up and stacked up and stacked up and stacked up. And they had nowhere to go. Nobody wanted them, nobody had a need for them, so they just stacked up and up and up and got cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. If you can make low quality parts using low quality materials, it acts as a nice way of hoovering up all of that cheap rubbish that isn't necessarily needed by everybody else, and it hoovers it up and has a use for it. And this, I think, is what's really quite clever about this, and it might ultimately lead to there being some floor prices on materials again. We might not necessarily always see prices just going down and down and down and down and down. That is along the assumption that people still want this mount and are still willing to buy this mount, because nobody's going to do this if nobody buys the mount. But I think it's cool enough that people probably will. So let's talk about pilfering in a little bit more detail then. When you pilfer, We can pilfer a bunch of stuff here. You get your parts. They spit out a bunch of parts. And if you're lucky, and, you know, there's a bit of RNG, there's a bit of gamba here. If you're lucky enough, you'll get some components that can go into making this mount. And I did some speculation, and this is what I really want to share with you guys today. The best thing to pilfer currently seems to be chaos circuits. These are a new item that is going to be made, and it seems to have both a reasonable crafting cost, but also a reasonable chance of giving you the components needed to craft this mount. So I suspect chaos circuits might be something that people focus on doing some pilfering. What I would say, though, is I've taken a guess at how much chaos circuits might cost to produce in the early expansion. Just some guesstimation on the prices. And it still seems to be that it will be a while before people are going to be pilfering specifically to get these components cheaper than what you can just go and buy them for the vendor. So buying them from the vendor is going to act as a really good gold sink. I mean, if you consider just one person coming along and buying the components they need, that's 3.1 million gold out of the game straight away, instantly. That is not gold that's being transferred to another player. That is literally gold out of the economy. That's the true definition of a gold sink, and clearly why Blizzard have implemented it this way. But of course, as time goes on and materials do what materials usually do, which is materials drop down in value, the price of making these chaos circuits will also drop down in value. And let's say they get as low as somewhere in the region of about 50 gold a piece, which is entirely possible. They don't necessarily need to be quality 3, by the way, as I've just mentioned. Your total expenditure might start to line up with what you would expect to get as a value out from pilfering, which I think is really quite interesting. It doesn't look like it's going to be something that people are doing too early on in the game, though. When the materials are high in value, it just might not be cost effective to do this. There will be a point at somewhere in the expansion where the materials line up nicely in value, and you'll be able to start doing this pilfering and hopefully finding yourself a bunch of components that go into making these mounts. To answer a couple of questions, I guess, that will be thrown my way straight away, all of the components that you get via pilfering are not bound in any way, meaning that you will be able to throw these up on the auction house if you wish. This might lead to a small trickle of the components being on the auction house from the word go, just by people purely getting lucky when they're leveling their profession and playing with this. But I don't think there'll be too many people targeting this specifically as a way to make gold too early on in the expansion, not until the materials come down in value anyway. The last thing I probably want to focus on is this pummel permit in a little bit more detail. This is clearly going to be the bottleneck item, and this is kind of like the jackpot loot, right? This is worth 1 million gold if you get it from this pilfering system. That alone, I think, might be enough for some people to just, you know, try, right? If they farm some materials, they might make some parts, and they then might pilfer them for the chance of turning them into 1 million gold. That chance is very small. You may have noticed, the smarter viewer amongst you will have spotted on my data, that I didn't actually get a pummel permit in any of my testing. You can get them, though. I did get sent a screenshot indicating that you can get pummel permits through pilfering. So there's, you know, there is some gambling here, some gamba opportunities for those that like that sort of thing. I thought I'd bring it to your attention today. And of course, if you've got access to the beta, feel free, jump on, do some testing, do some pilfering yourself, and let me know your results. This is one of those things that is always more easy to figure out if a bunch of people join together and share their data on this. But it's cool. 1, do you think the mount is cool enough in the first place? 2, would you even consider paying 3.1 million for it? 3, is this something that might make engineering look like a bit of an attractive profession for you to maybe make some gold again? Engineering's always had this weird kind of, it's so heavily utility that it's terrible for making gold. This might change everything, but let's see. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below, boys and girls. I'll leave it there for today. Give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Consider subscribing if you are new around here, and I'll catch you all next time. Peace.